Finally, Thursday's back. That means football is here. It's episode 164 of The Next Best Bet. I'm Jake Higgins with Brett Levy, as always. And Brett, tonight we have some college football and some NFL with the Giants and the Washington football team. We're going to talk about football in a little bit, but let's look at how we did last week because we finally got to Brett bet on week 1 of the NFL, and it was week 2 of college football. Now, I did okay. I went 4-3. My Bucks bet from way back when lost. They did not open very well against the Dallas Cowboys, but overall, my NFL did do well. I told you about the Browns plus 6.5 against the Chiefs. Pat Mahomes came back, but they could not cover.
Yeah, no, they did not cover that big line, Higgins. But I will say I took them live in that game when the line shrunk a little bit. So I was a winner on the Kansas City Chiefs because I got them at a nice small 3.5. And what do you know? They push across a little 4-piece, Higgins. But my betting for the podcast wasn't as good. I went 2-2. My Levy lock hit, so I can't really complain. I just gotta get back into positive units, Higgins, and that's what we're trying to do here this week.
49ers, your Levy lock barely covered their minus 7.5, winning by 8 over the Lions. My pick of the pot of the Blue Jays all the way from last Thursday over the Yankees. That did hit. We're going to talk about some Beginners Boulevard because, Brett, I think this term might come up when we're talking about some college football games this week. I'm talking about trap games. And this is when you have a high-ranked team playing against the team that no one really expects them to have any troubles with. But it could be a closer game, maybe on the spread especially, or maybe it's something like the Notre Dame Toledo pick that I had that lost last week. Notre Dame minus 16.5. They were able to come back and win, but Toledo played them really, really strongly.
Yeah, I think trap game is a good term. I think it's definitely possible that Notre Dame is in a trap game situation. Obviously, playing a much bigger opponent this week, Higgins. So that's a great example. Yeah, I can't really think of too many others offhand, but I think Notre Dame, very solid example.
Tulsa, Ohio State might also be one. Tulsa's been very interesting this year. Lost their home opener to UC Davis, who they were big favorites against, but then played really well against Oklahoma State. And Ohio State had a surprise at home last week against Oregon, so we'll see how that goes. Before we get into our college football, though, Brett, let's real quick talk about some MLB. I have one pick that I want to make for Thursday, and it's going to be in the Yankees-Baltimore game. The Baltimore Orioles at home, not only are they plus 1.5 on the run line, but that's at plus 135 value, and I love that, especially against Jordan Montgomery when he's a lefty, and the Orioles at home against lefties, they're fantastic. The Orioles are batting better on the year against lefties than they are righties and have scored nearly as many runs against lefties as they have against righties, and that's on significantly less amount of at-bats too. So the Orioles have done really well against lefties, much better at home compared to on the road as well, and at plus 135 value, I find that to be spectacular considering the Yankees as of late against the run line are an atrocious 2 of 8. Or 2 and 8, sorry, not 2 of 8, 2 and 8 out of 10. So that is just abysmal for the Yankees in their past 10 games against the run line. Baltimore against lefties have performed rather well this year. They're playing tonight as well, so I'm expecting the series finale, the regular season series finale on Thursday to be interesting, and plus 1.5 at that value, I got to take it.
Yeah, Higgins, I think you're probably on the right side here. Yankees struggling as of late. Red Sox and Blue Jays both have passed them in the standings. So should be interesting here. Baltimore currently 3 outs away from locking up a dub against the Yankees on Wednesday night. So that game very likely to finish before the end of our podcast recording, but I don't know what exactly happens in the ninth inning in this one, Higgins. But I do like where your head's at here. I think it's very realistic. Baltimore keeps this one within a run.
And Chris Ellis on the mound for the Orioles on Thursday. His ERA is at a 2.082. I like his ability to start off strong for them potentially. Brett, one more line that I found. This is an Oregon specific line for the MLB. And I've talked about this a few times with the NL West, and it's been interesting to see the Giants and Dodgers fight back and forth recently because they have traded places with first place. Who do you think's gonna win the NL West? Because in Oregon, there's a line Giants minus 160 and the Dodgers plus 135.
Yeah, so both these teams have clinched a playoff spot, Higgins. Yeah, who do I think is going to win the division? I would lean Dodgers, Higgins, but I know you're going to be there as well, so I can't bet this, but why don't you explain why you like it so much?
Yes, I like the Dodgers plus 135 mainly because of how these schedules end for each of these two teams. And I want to take a look at the Padres specifically, another NL West team that might fight for a wild card potentially, has struggled as of late, but is still alive in terms of playoff hopes. The San Francisco Giants, they play the San Diego Padres 10 times. They have a 4 game series and 2 more 3 game series, including the last 3 games of the season are against the Padres in San Francisco. Meanwhile, the Dodgers, their season to finish off looks significantly easier. They're ending the Arizona trip tonight. Then they face off against Cincinnati and Colorado on the road, and then they go to Arizona. And then they finish off at home with just one 3 game series against the San Diego Padres. And then the last series is against the Milwaukee Brewers. So these final series are going to be interesting for these two teams, but the Giants have to play the Padres so much, and that is a very powerful lineup that can and will put on some runs very quickly if they get hot. And it just takes a few hits for them to get hot. So I like the Dodgers at this plus 135 value. And just remember, I have said previously, I took a Giants potential World Series or a pennant pick earlier in the year, so I'm just playing my chances with this NL West because I think that's where it goes through in this NL this year.
Yeah, I personally think Padres probably dead in the water, Higgins, to be honest. But yeah, Dodgers, I think better roster. But Giants keep on winning, proving everyone wrong. So never gonna count them out. But let's dive in to college
Oh wait,
football.
but just the Padres. You said they're dead in the water. They're 1 game out of the wild card. They're not dead in the water.
Yeah,
They're dead in
I
the
mean,
water in terms of
well,
the NL West, but not the wild card.
I mean, I'm look, Higgins, you're asking my opinion. They're dead.
Yeah.
They're dead.
Okay.
They've
Okay.
had Blake Snell on the IL. They're pitching Vince Velasquez, who was waived by the Phillies. You don't think the Phillies want to keep a good pitcher on their roster right now? This is a guy they got to throw out at least twice here over the next 10 games. So look, I think the Padres probably the biggest disappointment in baseball this year. But yeah, technically, mathematically, they're still in it. But I'm not buying any Met stock either, Higgins. There are some teams that the math, sure, it could work out, but you know, probably booking their flights to Cancun.
Fair enough. You made some very great points about a very battered pitching staff for that Padres. Absolutely. Let's jump into the college football as you were saying, though, because there are some games on Thursday and Friday, but Brett, we're focused on the Saturday slate, right?
We are definitely focused on the Saturday slate. I will say one game might kind of pique my interest on the Friday slate, Illinois, Maryland, just because it's a Big Ten matchup, but nothing we really need to talk about there, Higgins.
No, in fact, there is another Big Ten team that I would like to talk about, though, because they're facing off against an old Big 8, Ten, Big 12 rival that they had of Oklahoma. We got Nebraska facing off against Oklahoma at Memorial Stadium, but not in Lincoln, the one in Norman. They're both named Memorial Stadium. It gets confusing, I know. This is in Oklahoma at the number 3 Sooners. And this is a game that I think the Sooners are just going to get back on track. They may have had a slow start in week 1. They absolutely dominated in week 2. And minus 22.5, I think that's still a little low. Nebraska did not look good against Illinois. They did not even blow the doors off of Buffalo, really. I'm not really that confident in Adrian Martinez and Scott Frost, who continue to struggle together with that offense. So minus 22 and a half. I like that for Oklahoma. And honestly, I'd probably play that to a minus 24 potentially. That's where I see it getting by Thursday, or by Saturday at least.
Yeah, Higgins, I think you're in the right mindset here. I was worried you were going to take Nebraska, but I think Oklahoma has to start winning and winning big if they want to make any noise for the college football playoff this year, Higgins. Texas does not seem to be as strong. That's going to be a game that hurts them. Or doesn't help them as much, doesn't hurt them if they win, but doesn't help them as much maybe in years past as they would. And some of these other Big 12 teams, Iowa State, people thought they'd be pretty good. Well, they go and lose to Iowa at home, so that's not so great, Higgins. Just they're going to need some signature, they're going to need some help along the way, I think. So blowing out a Big Ten opponent would be beneficial to Oklahoma here. I think that fits the narrative as well. Higgins, but sticking in the Big 12, if you don't
Well, wait,
mind.
I have one more
Okay.
pick from that game. I have one more pick from that game.
Oh,
So before we
double
just
bet.
jump from
I'm
that game,
sorry. I'm
yes.
sorry. I missed it. I missed the double
Yes.
bet. Hands up.
Because I did talk some smack about the Huskers offense and Adrian Martinez and Scott Frost. But let's be honest, they are averaging over 500 yards per game. They are still a very capable offense. And Oklahoma's defense did show and give up 35 points against Tulane. But Oklahoma's offense has scored 40 and 76. They can put up a ton. So if Nebraska can get three, maybe four touchdowns, I don't expect them to be close. I don't even expect that to still be within the 24 potentially. But this over under sitting at 61 and a half, I think it's way too low, Brett. I think this is going to be a game that's going to be in the 70s.
Yeah, I would hope for two touchdowns from Nebraska. I think you get into the 40s from Oklahoma. So I think that's within reason, Higgins, for sure. But three touchdowns. Whoa, boy! They couldn't score
I'm
three touchdowns against Illinois.
I'm thinking 56-21, 49-21, 56-14. That's what I'm seeing this game being. I'm thinking some garbage time points at the very end when you got some different players in potentially. You never know. Maybe a back breaks a run, or maybe just one guy gets open for a lucky play. That's what I'm thinking, where Nebraska maybe gets a third touchdown potentially there. But I think this over at 61 and a half, that's too low for me. That's way too low.
All right, fair enough, Higgins. Well, now I'll jump to a different Big 12 game because you do not have a third bet on Oklahoma,
No, I do not.
Nebraska. But Nevada is going in to Manhattan, Kansas, Higgins. And this one caught my attention because I think there's a bad line out there. I understand Nevada has quarterback Carson Strong. People get very excited because there's a lot of draft hype. When you ask a lot of these talking heads on ESPN, right, NFL Network, and you're like, pick a guy outside of Sam Howell to go in the top five. You hear, and the other name is Carson Strong. Carson Strong, big time prospect. I'm not sure a road game in the Big 12 though is really his place to shine. I don't think Nevada's roster is as strong as Kansas State's. Recruiting Big 12 players versus Mountain West players, Higgins. So I'm leaning Kansas State with the points here. I'm actually taking Kansas State with the points here at plus 1.5 because I think by the time we get to Saturday, Higgins, some sharper bettors will have come in on this and maybe scrunched that line down, maybe even making Kansas State the favorite by kickoff. But right now they're dogs, Higgins, so I'm going to hop all over that.
That makes sense. There's some interesting lines in the Big 12, absolutely. I mean, Kansas State getting that disrespect to Nevada, and then you see someone like West Virginia at home against a ranked Virginia Tech. And West Virginia, the 1-1 West Virginia Mountaineers, they're the favorites. I mean, it's interesting to see the Big 12 on this board right now, I don't really know what to make of some of it. I do like the Oklahoma Sooners. I do like your Kansas State Wildcats pick. Let's jump into some Big Ten, though, Brett, because, I mean, we got an SEC Big Ten showdown at night in Happy Valley. The Auburn Tigers facing off against the Penn State Nittany Lions. And it's going to be two quarterbacks that have each had 2 seasons under their belt now. Bo Nix and Sean Clifford, both 3-year starters. And I'll be honest, I don't have faith in Bo Nix like I have faith in Sean Clifford, especially in Happy Valley. Sean Clifford, the senior, at home in front of 100,000. It's going to be a whiteout. It's probably going to be sold out. And the line, it's only at -4.5 right now. I've seen it potentially at -5 in some spots too, depending on what books you have. I'm taking the -4.5 for the Penn State Nittany Lions, especially because they've already had a test in their season starting off against the Badgers. The Auburn Tigers, they've had two throwaway games recently. They played against Akron and they played against Alabama State. They haven't really been tested yet. So they're going into the Lions' mouth in a way, I guess, with the Nittany Lions, and I think they're going to get spit back out.
Yeah, Higgins. Well, I'm going to give you, I don't know if you want to call it good news or bad news or just news, but that spread is a little bit bigger here on the East Coast. Oh, actually, it literally, as I scrolled to it, just moved down half a point. Would you believe it? And got to the 4.5. So I cannot save you half a point anymore. That was incredible. I wish I was screen sharing or something, Higgins, because as I scrolled to it to give you the odds, it moved like literally the green arrow and the red arrow still up on the
Live
sportsbook.
updates on the
Crazy.
scoreboard.
Crazy. Yeah, unbelievable. So whatever it is, someone got in on it and moved the line. Maybe it was you, Higgins. Maybe you
Maybe it
took
was
that
me.
extra half a point. But anyway, what I was going to say is I don't know if I really believe there's a quarterbacking advantage here. Kind of what you were saying. Neither of these guys have truly established themselves as stars, even at the college level, Higgins. Bo Nix won some big games. This one's tough when it's a whiteout atmosphere at Penn State. That's truly, honestly, worth 3 points, Higgins, I think. I think it's that big of a difference, big of an atmosphere when it is a whiteout night game at Happy Valley. But I don't love this Penn State team. I don't love this Auburn team. This was a stay away from me. But I can guarantee I will be watching this top 25 matchup. I love Penn State whiteout games, Higgins. I love them when they're against out of conference teams. Normally, you get them against Ohio State, possibly a Michigan coming in, maybe a borderline rival game like Nebraska. But to get it for an Auburn, it feels kind of special. So it's a stay away from me. I like your Penn State play. We'll see what happens. A lot of times when these SEC teams match up with Big Ten teams in the postseason, it does not go well for the Big Ten teams. Now, a lot could play into that. Players may be sitting, who knows what else, but that is a big reason why I've strayed away, because last year in the bowl games, Higgins, it did not go well for these Big Ten teams against the SEC.
Except for against Auburn.
There you
Northwestern beat
go.
Auburn.
Oh, an
In
exquisite
fact,
Northwestern team, I might add.
yes, your Northwestern team, your boys right there. Auburn last year was 1-4 against ranked teams. Now, Penn State does not have nearly that experience of playing ranked teams, to your point. SEC has much tougher schedules in that sense. But Bo Nix does not have a lot of success against ranked teams, and traveling into Happy Valley, that line at only -4.5, I wouldn't mind seeing it potentially get to a touchdown, or I don't know what I think that game's going to be, but I think Penn State walks out of that game pretty handedly a winner.
All right, fair enough, Higgins. Well, here's a trend I am on. When a team fires their coach, take that team in the next game. I preach it all the time here. So you
Yes, you
have to
do. Yes, you do.
practice. You have to practice what you preach, Higgins. USC fires Clay Helton on Monday. On Saturday, they travel and face a very bad Washington State team. This Washington State team went 1-5 a year ago. USC, by the way, went 6-0 under Clay Helton. Yeah, they've been struggling, Higgins, but they have a lot of talent. They have a top pass rusher. They have a pretty good quarterback in Keldon Slovis, good enough that he ran Georgia's quarterback out of town. Said, "Sorry, you can't start here anymore," and he had to go to lowly Georgia, sitting at number 2 in the rankings right now, Higgins. So maybe USC kept the wrong guy. I'm unsure. Jury's still out, but I will take USC with a new coach in the "it was him, not us" game that always produces winners. USC -8.5 on the road. Not really worried about it. Nick Rolovich is being asked more questions about his vaccination status than about the status of the football team. So it's a mess in Washington State. It's a mess in USC. But you always have to back the team that just fired their coach.
I have nothing to argue about what you're saying there. If it wasn't for the pillars, I would be jumping on USC right with you, to be honest, because Washington State, they beat Portland State, if you could call that impressive, I guess. And last year, you're right, they went 1-5, and their only win was the first game of the season against Oregon State. So it's been a while since the Cougars have gotten a win. I don't think it's going to be this week, and I think you are right. That line doesn't seem too big enough, in my opinion, either, to be honest. I have one last pick in this game, Brett, and it's because I think Coastal Carolina is the truth. They're facing off against Buffalo. The line is at -14, -13.5, depending what book you're looking at. But I'm staying away from the line in this game. That is because 91% of the public at this very moment, Brett, is on Coastal Carolina -14. And as we know, the public more often than not loses. I think Coastal Carolina wins, but I think Buffalo will probably lick off their wounds from playing Nebraska and maybe come back and play a little bit better against Grayson McCall and the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. The over-under, it's sitting at 57.5. I think both of these offenses are fully capable of doing something like that. I mean, the Chanticleers, that offense is just potent and powerful. And in Buffalo, if they can just play better, and they're not facing off against a Big Ten defense this week, so I'm expecting them to play a little bit better. I can see it getting over that 57.5, so I'm taking over in this game.
All right, Higgins. I think that's an interesting play. I think it's interesting you bring up when the public's on something. The public wins sometimes too. Sometimes the
Sometimes,
public
but it's a little
wins.
scary when you see 91%. I don't know if I can talk myself into that bet, no matter as much as I love Coastal Carolina, because honestly, for the same reason, I'm staying away from Cincinnati, who I loved last year. I still love them this year, but they're facing off against an Indiana team, and Cincinnati's -1.5. They're 84% public favorites right now, so I'll love to watch that game. It sounds like it's going to be a fantastic game, but I'm not betting that. No. No.
Yeah, I'm with you on the Cincinnati. That's a no bet for me. Obviously Indiana's season went down the drain in week 1. They'd love to spoil someone else's season. But Higgins, I have one last bet on a college football Saturday as well. At least early bet. I may make some social media picks, Higgins, but Stanford is traveling to Vanderbilt. I normally hate West Coast teams traveling east. That is not a thing I like to bet. It's actually a reason I'm staying away of some NFL games. I stayed away from the Chargers last week traveling east. I stayed
I didn't.
away.
I won it.
You won it. There you go, Higgins. Someone had to win. But Stanford coming east, Higgins, and getting under 2 touchdowns against Vanderbilt. I just felt like if this one wasn't at 14.5, maybe I had to take Stanford. Like, This is a bet I could very easily see myself losing due to time zones, due to Stanford being a little down this year compared to years past, Vanderbilt having a true sophomore quarterback that looked much better than anticipated last season and has looked pretty good thus far. The kid Seals. So, look, maybe Stanford is down, maybe Vanderbilt's building up, but I'm not going to bet that. I'm going to take the proven commodity here. I'm going to take Stanford football in the battle of the nerds minus 12 and a half.
How can you not take Stanford after they just beat USC the way they did? I mean, you're going to believe in USC, and if you believe in USC, you got to believe in the team that just toppled USC, right?
Well, it's the USC is strictly you have to back teams that fire their coach. I mean, it's unbelievable what these teams do against the spread, Higgins. Hitting north of 58% of the time on the track. You just have to do it.
I
It's
agree.
an auto bet. That is one of the things I always bet no matter what. And look, do you lose 42% of the time? Yes, but you win 58, so you take that, Higgins.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Brett, let's jump into some money line magic. You said you thought that you were selling the Mets when we were talking about the MLB a little bit earlier. Well, we had a fantastic game between the Cardinals and the Mets on Tuesday night.
Yeah, no, it was actually well, I guess you could say it was fantastic, Higgins. I thought it was a BS game. Lucky for me though, Higgins, I've been watching the Mets documentary. So I've been focused on the 86 Mets, not so much the 2021 Mets, and it's helped keep my sanity in check because Tuesday night, Higgins, the Mets got off to a 2-0 lead in the first inning. They would add another run across the course of the game, Higgins. But we're going to kick things off here in the eighth, when the Cardinals were able to get across two runs, to take their first lead of the night and take a 4-3 lead late in this game. It would force the Mets to scramble a little bit, but they'd scratch one across in the bottom of the ninth, and we'd have extras, Higgins, with a lot on the line in the wild card race, as the Cardinals were a half game behind in the wild card race, and the Mets about 3.5 out.
Yeah, a solo shot from Baez in the bottom of the ninth helped you guys send it to extra innings. And the extra innings has really been interesting to see because some managers are playing it wildly different than others. But the 10th inning got quiet, and then in the 11th, both teams woke back up. The Cardinals scoring three in the top of the 11th, and then in the bottom of the 11th, the Mets. They tried. Pete Alonso hit a shot, but they weren't able to get 3 runs across, were they, Brett?
No, only two, unfortunately, leaving some runners on base, Higgins. But you can't argue they fought. You mentioned it, Javi Baez, a late home run. But it was a big win for the Cardinals as they jumped the Cincinnati Reds for that second wild card spot. And with the Giants locking up their wild card, or not wild card berth, they locked up a postseason berth. We think it's going to be the wild card, as we spoke about a little earlier. So I may have jumped the gun there. I apologize to
No
the San
worries.
Francisco Giants, but they locked up a postseason berth, so there's only one wild card spot left because one will go to the Dodgers or the Giants. Higgins, it's going to be very exciting down the stretch here. We've got the Cardinals in the second wild card as of Wednesday, but they're probably going to handle the Mets on Wednesday night. They're up pretty big, and Cincinnati's in it. You mentioned the Padres are in it. I kind of have them in the left for dead category with the New York Mets. I think it's kind of a two-horse race here between the Reds and the Cardinals. Maybe the Phillies stay in it. Maybe they drop out with their pitching issues.
Yeah, the Phillies are 3 games back of the Cardinals as of Wednesday night, while there are still some games to be playing. Mets are 4 games out. You said you sold the Mets. I'd say that's about the cutoff of where I'd say teams have contention. I mean, we're already halfway through September, so there is some magic that can happen. There are 10 game stretches. Teams can wake up and do some magic here, but those teams, the Phillies, the Mets, the Reds, even the Padres, really, they all need help to get to the Cardinals right now. The Cardinals, that's who everyone's taking shots at right now. And that's even where teams that might be close to being eliminated or are eliminated, they're licking their chops, potentially trying to play spoiler in these last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, if you had asked me a month ago, or I guess not really asked, if you had told me a month ago, Higgins, everyone would be looking up at the Cardinals, I would have been like, dude, you are drunk. Or maybe you're looking at the NFL West, the NFC West standings. I can't help you right now.
Yeah, the MLB, it's going to be a wild ride to the wild card, absolutely, at least in that NL. Before we jump into the NFL, though, today's episode is brought to you by DB. DB is a Scandinavian brand that makes backpacks and bags to help people on the move stay ready for anything. From the streets to the peaks, DB's gear is travel tested by some of the world's best athletes, adventurers, and creators. Over the past decade, DB has designed and developed, released, and refined the best bags in the market. With DB's patented hookup system, you are able to attach smaller products to your backpack, roller, or tote. I can't stress enough how important it is to find the right luggage for every travel scenario. We are teaming up with DB to exclusively offer our listeners 10% off your next purchase by using the code POD10, that's POD10, or going to the link in our show's description. DB, it's time to move on, time to get going. Brett, like I mentioned at the top of the show, it is Thursday. That means we have Thursday night football. We have been waiting months for football to be back. And then we had a taste of it, and we had to wait Tuesday and Wednesday. It was a long 48 hours for me, but I am smiling knowing that we are less than 24 hours away as we record this. How about you?
Higgins, let's just say the FanDuel Sportsbook here in New Jersey saw a lot of action on the casino from my account over these last 48 hours. Not so much the sportsbook.
So enjoying being in New Jersey, I see, with the new house a little bit. I see.
A little bit, Higgins. We are making do.
Well, let's talk about the Thursday night scenario because I think week one told us a lot about last year's worst division, the NFC East. Dallas, Philadelphia, those two teams might be the only two teams worth talking about in the NFC East. But Thursday night, we're talking about the other two teams, the Giants and the Washington football team. And this line, with it being at plus 3.5, I'm going to take the Giants while it's there because, Brett, we've talked about key numbers on this podcast before. The key number in football is 3 or 7. And you know what? I'm taking the Giants at plus 3.5 before it gets down to plus 3 potentially. And I see this being a low scoring game. We saw the Giants have no offensive output against the Denver Broncos, really. And Washington lost Ryan Tannehill, and I don't really have a lot of faith beyond Antonio Gibson on that offensive side of the ball either. So it's going to be interesting to see either of these offenses try to work, especially with what I would say each team has a rather decent defense, at least at the front line for the Washington football team, and the secondary and linebacker core for the Giants. But the offenses, both these teams are going to struggle all season long, I think. So plus 3.5, I think it's going to be harder for either of these teams to ever get a win by more than a field goal.
Yeah, Higgins, I do have some thoughts on the game. I don't particularly love the spread or the over under in this one. I could see both these quarterbacks making costly turnovers where maybe the defense scores a touchdown or two and that puts the over under in risk. I could see, you know, both these quarterbacks breaking off a long run, quote unquote, and potentially putting their team in scoring position. I don't expect a lot of passing in this one, Higgins. I expect both teams to be very run heavy on a Thursday night. So maybe I would look Taylor Heineke props. His over under in New Jersey is 33.5 pass attempts with the juice heavy on the over, minus 122 on the over, minus 108 on the under. I would actually look at the under on that number, Higgins, and say I would look Antonio Gibson to get a lot of carries, Jarrett Patterson to get a lot of carries. If he is dropping back, maybe I would look for Logan Thomas or Terry McLaurin touchdowns, but I don't think Taylor Heineke's spreading the ball around to like 5, 6 different guys. I think he's kind of locked in on target one, target two, and going into those guys. So that's kind of how I'd play this game. Maybe in the prop market, favor rushing props, maybe fade some passing props, Higgins.
Well, you want to talk props. You and I always look at different sides of the ball. I love to look at the positive sides. I love to look at the big hitters. So you look at touchdown props, we're talking about costly turnovers. Either of the defense potentially make a touchdown. I mean, at least I'm looking in Oregon, Washington football team's defense. It's at plus 350. The Giants are at plus 450. I don't know. I'd like to see those potentially closer to plus 500. I'd try to shop around and find something like that. But I wouldn't be surprised to see, I mean, especially with the Washington football team, a fumble recovery. Chase Young runs the football into the end zone. Potentially a pick by the Giants running in for a touchdown. I wouldn't be surprised to see a turnover and a defensive score potentially in this game. I love the player prop market on a Thursday night, absolutely. Let's take a look at Sundays, though, Brett, because you and I, well, at least I, will be waking up bright and early with the 10 a.m. games. You get to have them at 1 p.m., but we're both eyeing some of these early games.
Yeah, I'll be up early, Higgins. Don't you worry. I got my Sunday morning show, Fantasy Sports Today, on Sports Grid. So I'll be up bright and early here on the East Coast. Not really paying too much attention to this show, just setting my fantasy lineup, right?
Best of luck to the fantasy. I had three teams. One of my teams I'm the commissioner of, and I scored an abysmal 66 points. Everyone went single digits for me. It was brutal. I got embarrassed. Got embarrassed. It was bad. It was bad.
Oh,
But
man.
anyways, let's talk about the sports betting lines. I want to talk about a very interesting tweet that I saw. The Giants are a part of this tweet, Brett, but it really plays into effect when we are looking at Sunday's slate. And it was by a guy, Gilbert Gallant on the FTN network. He tweeted out an NFL bet trending alert that since 2014, 60.4% of teams that lose by double digits in week one go on to cover the spread in week two and win outright 46% of the time. Now, there are 7 teams that lost by double digits in week one: Atlanta, Tennessee, Indianapolis, Jacksonville, Green Bay, the Giants, and Chicago. I picked the Giants in Thursday's game. I have another one of these that I like in Sunday's slate as well. Indianapolis plus 3.5. Also, we have key numbers. They're facing off against the Rams. Rams have played really well on Sunday night against the Chicago Bears. I think part of that was the home opener in the brand new stadium with a packed full of fans, though they did get to carry that out a little bit. Now they're going on the road in Indianapolis. Carson Wentz did start off rather well with Indianapolis. They just played a really strong Seattle Seahawks team. So I think this is going to be a potential field goal ender, a potential low scoring matchup, and the defenses are going to take more control in this. So plus 3.5 for Indianapolis. I'm going to be taking that while it stays outside of that key number.
Yeah, that's an interesting play, Higgins. Obviously, being the home team, getting points, always a live dog. Thought Los Angeles, the Rams looked pretty good last week against Chicago. Did not think Indianapolis looked particularly well. Was not particularly impressed by Carson Wentz, but I
He
think
started 9 for 10, but Seattle did a lot and made him have to pass, and then it made it a lot harder for him to be able to hit targets, I think. But you're right, the Rams were spectacular. Stafford, that first drive with the 67-yard touchdown, he's sitting comfortably in LA, I think.
yeah. So like I said, definitely potential for a live dog there. I'm staying away from that one. A team I'm looking to fade, Higgins, the Las Vegas Raiders, who had a big national TV game where they beat the Baltimore Ravens, who were pretty big favorites on the road in Las Vegas. Now Las Vegas needs to travel all the way across the country. Short week, early kickoff. I hate this spot for the Raiders. Give me Pittsburgh -5.5. I think this one literally has nothing to do with the teams on the field. Could be anyone in Las Vegas's situation. Tough for them to cover in the NFL.
Not to mention, Pittsburgh just played a spectacular game up in Buffalo, surprising a lot of people. Now they get to go home, play their home opener. It's going to be a lot more comfortable. You mentioned the short week. Not to mention, they had to play a full extra quarter in that game, so that's going to be a little bit harder, I agree. By the way, speaking of that Monday night game, you watched the Peyton Eli broadcast, or did you watch the normal broadcast?
Absolutely watch Peyton and Eli, and there is a quite the Twitter movement, Higgins, to get the Tennessee Ole Miss game
I
also
like
on the
that.
Manning broadcast.
I
I
like
want
that.
to plant my flag in that camp as well, Higgins. I'm all in for that.
Next best bet is firmly in the Peyton Eli broadcast for Tennessee Ole Miss. Absolutely, I want to see that. Are you kidding me? They're going to be doing it again on Monday night. I saw a tweet asking who they should have for the Lions Green Bay game. I'm thinking Megatron. I mean, he just got his gold jacket. Seems fitting you bring him back on screen potentially if he wants to do it.
Yeah, Brett Favre and Jordan Love, for that matter, might both be available.
Absolutely. Let's stick to Sunday real quick, though, as well, Brett. I want to talk about an NFC South matchup. I talked a big game about Jameis Winston stepping in to be the starting quarterback for the Saints. He didn't throw for quite as many yards as I expected him to in week one. He still had 5 touchdown passes, but they're facing off against the Carolina Panthers. I don't expect that to be as tough of a task as Green Bay was. Green Bay laid an egg in week one, but that doesn't. I mean, that was the offense that laid the egg. The defense is still the defense for Green Bay. Carolina's defense still has a lot of questions. They only played against the New York Jets, so I still have a lot of questions on what that Carolina defense is going to look like this year. New Orleans offense still looked rather comfortable with Jameis at the helm, and with it being only -3.5, I'm taking the Saints right now on Thursday because I think that line's going to be moving.
Yeah, I'm very interested to watch this game, Higgins. The Saints were one of the teams I was not really buying in on going into the season. And week one, when they demolished the Packers, you have to be like, oh my goodness, what did I just see? So I'm curious, are the Saints for real? Are the Panthers for real? Because one of these teams is going to be 2-0, Higgins, and that is going to be huge, especially if Tampa Bay has a little trouble with Atlanta this week. Now, I expect Tampa Bay to win, but if they don't win, if they don't dominate pretty much from start to finish, maybe one of these other teams at 2-0 has enough of a scheduling advantage or something where they can maybe sneak up on Tampa Bay a little bit for the division.
Well, we're talking about planting flags in camps, Brett. I've already made my futures pick. I took the over 9 wins for the Saints. I've planted my flag that they're going to be good this year. Another team I planted my flag with was Arizona and the Cardinals over 8.5. They got a very big upset win in week one over Tennessee. And then my third future that I took there was the under 9 wins for Dallas. Now they lost to Tampa Bay, a team you mentioned earlier. I don't know how much that necessarily says about that team because Dak performed rather well in that game. So I'm very curious to see what the Cowboys team looks like with that 9 wins being where that was set at when I took that last week.
Yeah, Higgins. Well, you could look very smart with the Saints for sure. And the Cardinals. Cardinals looked very good against the Titans last week. I took a future, though, Higgins, on the Seahawks to win the NFC West. And wouldn't you know it, the Titans face off against the Seahawks. Seattle, it's their home opener, Higgins. Seattle, notoriously tough place to play. fans back for the first time in a year, or maybe not. Maybe they had fans last year, but more fans back this year,
The true
definitely.
12th man. It's
Yeah,
the true 12th man
exactly.
this year.
Exactly. Not the sixth man. We got the 12th man.
Absolutely. It is very tough to play in Seattle. It does surely get very loud there, Brett. But I think this is going to be a very interesting game. And personally, I like the Titans walking in here because I think this line going into Thursday is a little too big. It's at plus 5.5, at least in Oregon where I found it. And I'm taking the Titans at plus 5.5 right now because for one simple reason. The biggest issue that the Titans had in week one was Chandler Jones. Seattle does not have Chandler Jones on their defensive line. And their left tackle took accountability on Twitter immediately after, said he's going to be better. I expect he's going to be better this week. And Ryan Tannehill is going to have some more time. The offensive line is going to be better. Seattle is a tough place to play. You are right. But plus 5.5, I think that line is too big. I think this game is going to be closer to being within a field goal. I don't think it's going to be tied coming down to a game-winning field goal, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's a 4-point game and there's a final drive or something like that. I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be really close.
Yeah, Higgins, I have a lot of concerns about the Tennessee defense and DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and Russell Wilson might even, if you believe it or not, be more dangerous than the big three for Arizona because Arizona's got a big two, but they don't have a third as good as Lockett, Higgins. So I might even be more concerned for Tennessee in this one. And, just to be honest with you, Higgins, and I did mention this in the rundown before the show. I mentioned that I'll say something. So I got to say something. I think you're betting this wrong. If you think Chandler Jones was the big problem, not the offensive line for the Titans, so like Chandler Jones is so good, it doesn't matter who the offensive line is, you should be betting on the Cardinals, not betting on the Titans to bounce back. I think if your belief in the Cardinals is that strong, personally, I read the situation like the Titans' O line might be that bad. And Seattle's defense looked better than a year ago against the Colts in the opening game. So I think I have concerns about Julio Jones, how he looked in week one. 3 receptions, 39 yards. That's not going to cut it for your highest paid wide receiver, Higgins. I have a lot of concerns about Tennessee's defense. I am not pushing the panic button on Tennessee. I still think they're the team to beat in the AFC South, excuse me, but color me concerned.
I understand you thinking I'm betting the wrong side of this if I'm so high on the Cardinals, and to be honest, by Sunday I probably will be betting the Cardinals. The only reason I'm not bringing the Cardinals up as a bet in this podcast, to be honest, Brett, is because I already have 10 picks.
Yeah,
I already
okay,
have
yeah.
10 picks, and we're trying to save some time.
What's 20
But you know
picks?
what? If I am so high on Chandler Jones, let's just bring it back to July real quick. I did have a future that I boasted about on this podcast, did not make an official podcast pick, but I said that I thought he was going to be a potential defensive player of the year candidate. He moved up from plus 4,000 odds to like plus 800 odds just after his week one performance because he had 5 sacks and 2 forced fumbles. So instantly seeing some value in terms of cashback availability there in week one for me. But you're right. I should probably be bringing up Arizona against Minnesota as well, especially with the Cardinals home opener. But I have 10 picks already in this game, so that's probably going to be a social media pick that I'll be making closer to Sunday.
All right, Higgins. Well, rare occasion, I hit my Levy lock. Uh, did you hit your pick of the pod? Let
We
me
both hit
scroll.
our Levy lock
We
pick at the pod,
both
so I
hit.
still got
Wow.
that
So
half game lead on you.
you are still in the lead, Higgins. Obviously, the honors also stay with you as you are on a little streak here.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm taking it back to some college football. Going into Saturday, we have the old school rivalry of Nebraska versus Oklahoma, And Brett, I wanted to share a fun fact because if you remember, I've talked about how I used to live in Nebraska, so I follow a lot of Nebraska sports reporters as well. And they like to boast about how dominant Nebraska was back in this whole Big 8 era. Well, back in the 70s to 80s, in that Big 8 era, there was 13 losses that Nebraska ever had in that conference. 7 of those was to Oklahoma. This was a 9-7 streak during that time. It was a very contentious rivalry back then. That was when Nebraska was at their peak. Oklahoma wasn't necessarily at their peak back then. Oklahoma was good, but they always faced off really tough against Nebraska. Oklahoma is really good now. Is Nebraska? The line's only minus 22.5. I said I'll take it up to minus 24. I'd probably even take it if it's up to minus 28 because I think that Oklahoma's going to really blow them out here. I think the doors are blowing off. That's why I took the over. I think it's going to be no contest. It's at Memorial Stadium, but not in Lincoln. It's in Norman, and that's for good reason because Oklahoma's going to win.
All right, Higgins. Well, you're taking the Sooners, and I'm going up to the Pacific Northwest. I'm going back to that Seattle, Tennessee game. We're on opposite sides. I'm doubling down, Higgins, making it my Levy lock. I really am concerned about Tennessee. Again, not pushing the panic button. Still my favorite to come out of the AFC South. Might even get better odds on it at this point in the season, coming off a loss. Actually, maybe not because the Colts also lost, so odds probably didn't shift that much, unless the Texans jumped all the way up for some crazy reason. But yeah, I don't think the odds probably shifted too much in that market. But anyway, back to the Seahawks pick. I'm concerned about Tennessee. If anything, I'm more confident in the Seahawks because they performed pretty well on the road. Their defense looked better. Offense did what it had to do. Still concerned, is there another option for Russell Westbrook? Gerald Everett did have a touchdown reception from the tight end position. We were expecting he'd be an upgrade over what Russell Wilson's had the last 2 seasons at that position. So he may continue to emerge here, Higgins. And I think the Seahawks continue to build. Home opener. Tough crowd in Seattle. Tennessee did not look very good last week. I'm fading the Titans in week 2.
I wish I could say I was rooting for you. I wish I could say I was rooting for you.
Fair enough.
Well, we have the Levy lock. We have the pick of the pod. I have a half-game lead on you, but not if you win this week, not only will you probably take a half-game lead on me, but I'll also lose one of my picks of in this podcast, so it'll be interesting. You mentioned that you might have some college football picks on our social media. I might have some more NFL picks. Make sure to follow us there at NBB Pod on Twitter, at Next Best Bet on Instagram, and the Next Best Bet Facebook page and YouTube channel. This has been episode 164 of the Next Best Bet. For Brett, I'm Jake. We'll talk to you again next week.